So there have been many conspiracy theories about what really happened to the Boeing 7878 Dreamliner with the 242 people on board that crashed into Ahmedabad. In this video, we're going to discuss all of these scenarios that have been presented and take a look at what experts believe might have really happened when that aircraft crashed into the medical college in Ahmedabad moments after taking off. Now, we know the 241 people on board have died and only one person has survived, and several other individuals who were doctors in that medical college or passers-by have been either injured or killed as well. Now, 4 days after that crash happened, 87 victims so far have been identified with their DNA. 47 bodies have been handed over to their families, and authorities are continuing activities right now, DNA testing, to identify the bodies of the victims who in many cases are charred beyond recognition. 29 people have been reported killed in the disaster on the ground. That includes 5 MBBS students who deserve a moment of our attention, because these were young people with hopes of becoming a doctor who would have taken their NEET exams, secured a seat, and actually were on their way to becoming doctors, who were doing nothing except having lunch in their canteen when this horrible thing happened to them. Taking a look at the investigations, though, last week when the Union Home Minister was on the ground, he said basically that the temperature of that explosion of the plane that was carrying 1.25 lakh litres of fuel basically was so high that it was impossible after that explosion to save anyone except that one individual from seat 11A who miraculously walked away. We do know from the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau that's investigating this incident right now, alongside the US National Transportation Safety Board. They're conducting 2 parallel probes right now as per international protocol. They have confirmed that the cockpit voice recorder has been found. Earlier, the AAIB, without giving details, said the digital flight data recorder, commonly known as the black box, was recovered from the rooftop of the crash site as well. And that will actually allow the investigators to build the last moments back together and to sort of try and reconstruct and figure out what really happened. A quick detour for those of you who don't know what a black box is. It's a small device that records information on an aircraft continuously when the aircraft is in flight. It's a flight recorder. It actually started around the 1950s. It's actually incidentally not black. It's a bright orange or a bright yellow box, which should be, in order to make it easier to find after crashes. And it's built to withstand explosions and water pressure and fire and high-speed crashes. It has 2 recorders inside it. It records all of the sounds from the cockpit, so the cockpit voice recorders, and it also records all flight data as well. So since this has been found, and it normally takes about 10 to 15 days to recover all of the data from black boxes on an average, it should very quickly help investigators establish what's really going on. Now, to give you a quick recap, remember from that 787 aircraft, there was a mayday call made to air traffic control almost immediately after takeoff. The last message that came from the crew was mayday, mayday, and then there was silence. Also, I want to remind you that mayday is used by pilots and by ship captains when they're declaring a life-threatening emergency requiring immediate help. So when there is a mayday call, all other non-essential radio traffic must stand down. ATC has to pay immediate attention, and pilots provide call signs, location, nature of emergency, and number of people on board, and ask for help. So this is what was going on at that time, or the last message really that came from those pilots. Now, the aviation minister, the Union Aviation Minister, Mohan Naidu, has said in a briefing last week that there will be a decoding of that black box, that any theory about how that plane crashed will be analyzed thoroughly. There will be proper investigations, and we will know eventually after these investigations are done what has really happened. Now, as the investigation proceeds, the report will eventually be submitted to government. There are possible theories as to what happened in that crash. Let me take you through a couple of things that have been floating around, and then we'll look at what the experts are saying. One, the idea of dual engine failure. Primarily, investigations and video analysts are suggesting that the plane took off and there was low thrust, and it's likely that both engines failed. It'd be an important thing to find out why both engines failed at that time. The idea of what you've been hearing a lot of RAT, which is the ram air turbine, which is a backup source of power. From the visuals that have come out now, and now we have the original video of that teenager who shot it from his rooftop to send, he was just randomly apparently shooting visuals of, aircrafts taking off and landing, and he happened to catch this visual. There's one story in the news talking about how this young person is completely traumatized by what he saw. But now that we have the original of that video and people are taking a look at it, it suggests that the RAT, or the ram air turbine, was activated, suggesting that there was complete failure of both engines. And the possibility that thrust was not achieved for which one theory is that the pilot had actually said thrust not achieved, mayday. All of these things will have to be investigated into. Another theory is that this was a more electric failure than actual aircraft architecture failures, which means that the electrical systems that were powering the fuel valves or the engine controls could have had some sort of malfunction, and that might have been a problem. There was another theory floating around about fuel contamination or fuel eruptions, electrical faults. The third one about electronic engine control systems having gone down. There has been some buzz on social media about whether or not the pilots had done their job, but it's been very clear from the experience of these pilots that they were very highly experienced pilots, and considering that there are checklists that have to be gone through, especially on such a large aircraft that was flying so long haul. The theory of whether or not the pilots were at fault is a weak one at this point. Bird strikes are being ruled out right now by experts, and there have been some local political figures who've suggested the idea of a cyber attack or some sort of sabotage, and those ideas are also largely being refuted and dismissed at this point. I want to take you through two fundamental expert theories that are coming out. One, and this is an important one, is from the former Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Arup Raha, who's retired. He has spoken, and he said that by looking at the visuals, it definitely looks like the flight lost power at a critical stage and there was no time for recovery. He said there could be many other possibilities like fuel contamination or glitches in software. He has rejected very clearly the idea of sabotage. He said we should not speculate on these things and we should wait for the DGCA's investigation to come through. And he said for a large aircraft like the Boeing 7878 Dreamliner, to generate thrust and lose power on both engines simultaneously is very rare. It's a 1 in a billion case, and that is something that really needs to be looked into, because from the visuals, it does appear that that is what has happened, because the idea is that if one engine had gone down, the flight would have become lopsided, but you can see from that visual that it has remained stable, and it's remained sort of really stable towards the end. Raha has also said that he doesn't believe it could be a bird hit. He's basically said that there were complaints made by whistleblowers in their own companies. Those need to be investigated. Now, I've also put up a previous video where I've talked about all of the whistleblower complaints against Boeing, specifically of all of their aircrafts and also the Dreamliner. And this is something that will require investigation. Remember, there were some cases that were actually settled out of court with payment. And you can take a look at that previous video as well. We've put the link in the comment section and in the description about what the issues are or what the controversies are really with Boeing. Another expert, an aviation expert called Captain Steve Schneibner, has come up with his assessment of the crash. He is a former US Navy pilot and apparently widely respected for his aviation analysis. Now, he said that initially he had said that there are 4 possible causes for the crash. He said loss of fuel, fuel contamination, bird strike, or flap setting error. But now he has sort of changed his opinion after re-looking at the new footage, and he said, and I'm quoting, you can see a protrusion in the belly of the aircraft. That grey dot is the RAT, the ram air turbine, which is a device designed to deploy automatically if both engines fail and if the aircraft loses its hydraulic or electric systems. Now, this is visual confirmation that RAT has been deployed, is not meant to activate under any other condition. So it is a clear indication that both engines had in fact failed. Now, the ram air turbine, like I said, is an emergency power that comes out only when both of those engines have failed, and it is triggered automatically, although the pilot can manually deploy it as well by activating a switch. There's the other, remember we talked about whistleblowers and controversies with regards to Boeing. Jitendra Bhargava, who's the former executive director at Air India, has said, and I'm quoting, "If you look at the Dreamliner's history, notwithstanding the controversies and the various technical aspects in the past, it has served the aviation industry well. It is the first instance of the Dreamliner aircraft being involved in an accident." And he said, as far as this accident is concerned, I'm not going to hazard a guess. It could have been a bird hit, it could have been a technical issue. Let's wait for the investigation. So what happens now? Obviously, investigators will actually be looking at the cockpit voice recorder, they'll be looking at the flight data recorder, that will be analyzed as well. There will be these two simultaneous, the American investigators, Indian investigators who are looking at it, that black box investigation, and we'll find out what happened, hopefully sooner than later, because for these 270 odd lives that have been lost, these families that are now devastated for no fault of their own, these are families who deserve answers. For people taking flights on a daily basis with a certain level of trust that we place, in our aviation sector, in the companies that run these, run these aircraft, this is something that we want them to take more seriously. So everybody wants answers at this point, because everybody is worried about whether or not they're safe. I want to give you some details of what has happened in the last 1 week that's making people unhappy. On the 15th of June, one aircraft from Jeddah landed in Lucknow, and there was smoke coming out of the wheels after landing. That plane is now returning to Jeddah. A Delhi-bound Air India Boeing 787 Dreamliner from Hong Kong returned to Hong Kong airport after takeoff because the pilot suspected a technical issue. A Delhi-Vadodara Air India flight went back to Delhi after takeoff because of a suspected problem in landing gear. This happened on the 14th of June. On the 13th of June, an Air India flight from Phuket to Delhi received a bomb threat and had to be sent back to Thailand. So there's a lot going on in commercial aviation in India right now that's making people very nervous, and some answers would be welcome and very necessary. It's important at this point, as as the general public, not to get distracted and move away from this issue, because while the investigations are going on, we must continue to ask questions. Public memory tends to be very short, and a lot of times people tend to move on even before the investigation results come out, and that is where a lot of the steam is lost in terms of asking questions and demanding answers. So hopefully the people who run the airline, which is Air India, the people who have actually built that aircraft, which is Boeing, and those who are going to conduct this investigation, which is the DGCA in India, will do a responsible job and give us answers for not just these families, but for everyone who takes flights on a daily basis in India. Leave me a comment in the comment section on what you think is really going on and what sort of answers you believe you deserve to have as someone who takes flights in India on a regular basis.